but it's a possibility, and I will ask that the appeal procedure can be taken forward.
So where does it leave a far-right party that's built so much of its identity around Marine Le Pen and before that, her father? Also ahead, Gulf diplomacy. Finland's president tells how FaceTime on the fairway with Donald Trump helped push Europe's case for Ukraine.
If there was a pendulum of trust and distrust, certainly Russian activity in the past few weeks has proven that we're moving more towards the distrust.
At the hot, sharp end of President Trump's trade war, how workers in a Rust Belt state feel about the risks to revive America's manufacturing glory days. Two girls and their grandmother show what it's like being trapped in the rubble of Myanmar's earthquake. And 2 weeks after they came back down to Earth, astronauts Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore discuss what went wrong in space. Good evening. Marine Le Pen's political career has seen plenty of ups and downs over the years, but appeared on track for its peak, the French presidency, within just a couple of years. That was until today. In a ruling that rippled across Europe, a Paris court convicted the far-right National Rally leader of embezzlement and barred her from running in the 2027 presidential election. There was a prison term too, though she'll remain free. Among supporters at home and abroad, the outrage is loud and in sync, targeted at judges they believe are part of weaponized justice systems. Elon Musk offered this on his platform X. When the radical left can't win via a democratic vote, they abuse the legal system to jail their opponents. This is their standard playbook throughout the world. But while the sentence is tough, the crime involved millions of euros wrongly funneled away from where it was supposed to be spent. And it's far too early to answer perhaps the biggest question of all. What will voters make of Marine Le Pen's conviction? Our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons reports from Paris.
Strident, confident and unapologetic, Marine Le Pen's brand of politics had made her the front-runner to become France's next president. Now that ambition has been dashed. She's been banned from running in the next election. Le Pen had strolled into a Paris courtroom today, charged with helping to embezzle millions of euros. She stormed out early, knowing she'd been found guilty, bristling with anger.
Rendez-vous compte. Do you realise that on this fateful day, Monday the 31st of March 2025, such a critical day, what this represents for our democracy and for our country, when millions of French people will be denied by a court judge without any possible recourse, the candidate who was until today the favourite to win the presidential elections? Surely that must shock and horrify all those who respect democracy and the rule of law.
Le Pen was convicted of embezzling money here at the European Parliament, diverting funds earmarked for supporting the work of MEPs into propping up the finances of her own party. The judge said she'd been at the heart of this system. But for some, even her political rivals, it is worrying that a court can decide who runs for president. Prime Minister François Bayrou called the decision troubling.
Is this the end for Marine Le Pen? She started the day as the favourite to be France's next president. She ends it as a convicted criminal, barred from even taking part in the election, her ambitions in tatters.
Already, accusations that France's political establishment had engineered this verdict to keep her out of power. Elon Musk claimed the radical left had chosen to abuse the legal system. But there are many others who see this as gratifying proof that nobody is above the law.
I don't think she was surprised, since she left before the verdict was announced. So I read it as an admission of guilt. So there you have it. Justice takes its course. That's very good.
Well, listen, I'm delighted. Well, I'm just afraid that it'll victimize her and people will think, oh, poor woman, she doesn't deserve this. Anyway, that's it. Anyway, I think she deserves it, and it's great.
Her place at the top of the National Rally Party likely to fall to this man, 29-year-old Jordan Bardella, popular with young voters but lacking Le Pen's enormous fame and name. She will appeal. The party will contest and fight this decision. But Le Pen is wounded like never before.
And Adam joins me now from Paris. I mean, Adam, just that last sentence, she's wounded like never before. You and I were in Paris together last year when, even though the far-right party, the National Rally, didn't win those parliamentary elections, things were looking good for Marine Le Pen, her party, and those around her. And this really was a bombshell ruling.
Absolutely was. I mean, the trajectory of Marine Le Pen's career has been fascinating, following on from her father and then these failed runs at the presidency. And yet this time it appeared she had momentum. Her party had done well at the start of the campaign for the parliamentary election. Second round didn't do as well as they hoped. But nevertheless, this morning, Marine Le Pen was the favourite to be France's next president in the election in 2 years' time. And yet now she's had this calamitous day. Now, there is one path which her supporters, I think, are still holding on to, is that she could, or she will appeal. That appeal could be heard in, let's say, a year's time. She might find the evidence to support it. She may be cleared. She may have that ineligibility ban reduced. She may be allowed to run in 2027, and the momentum behind her, this idea that she took on the establishment and won, this very Donald Trump line of they couldn't stop me, they tried, but fight, fight, fight. I'm sure that is what she would channel. That is an optimistic opinion if you are a Marine Le Pen supporter. The reality is that that is extremely unlikely. Instead, the RN is now looking around to see who can lead them. That's probably going to be Jordan Bardella. But the ripples, Yalda, of this decision are enormous. For one thing, the president of the tribunal who laid down this decision, a very senior judge, is now having to rely on police protection in her home because of the sheer number of threats made against her. Geopolitically, this decision has been lambasted by Russia and by the United States. The State Department calling this lawfare. Donald Trump Jr. saying that Marine Le Pen has been jailed, which she hasn't. Elon Musk saying she's been jailed, which she hasn't. So we've already seen, in a sense, this kind of populist spinning of these facts to make a point. But at its kernel, there is a fear, and it's not just among Marine Le Pen's supporters, that this decision does nothing for French democracy, that it makes it look that the establishment has decided who will be running for the presidency, and that worries a lot of people, not just Marine Le Pen.
And Adam, I saw a line about the fact that the party are now calling for people to come out and mobilise onto the streets. This is something that the French are used to, coming out and protesting, but no doubt there's going to be a huge amount of concern about what that could escalate into.
Absolutely. You are right. The French are no strangers to holding a protest, to going out onto the streets, and there will be those who will be asking them to do that. I think the Rassemblement National will probably take a moment to think about this, but certainly they will be trying to mobilise their support. They will be trying to discredit this decision. Marine Le Pen has already been on television tonight giving an interview where she has considered this to be an unjust verdict, and I think you will see that go on and on. She has to tread slightly carefully because she is still part of this judicial process. She will launch an appeal, and I'm sure the lawyers will be guiding her at what she could and couldn't say. But there is anger among the supporters of the RN and perhaps other parties, and certainly you are seeing people who are not traditional bedfellows. I mentioned the Prime Minister saying that he is troubled by this, and parties on the far left of French politics are echoing that as well, saying that they find this decision to be upsetting, troubling, difficult and unjustifiable.
And that could be the catalyst for protests. That will worry many. I think the simple fact that tonight there are police officers outside the home of the president of this tribunal is an early warning that this has the potential to be a catalyst for something much more serious.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam, we're going to keep you right there and just give a flavour of the history and the rise of the movement. Now, as I said, let's just look at the rise of this movement. Marine's father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, and other far-right figures founded National Front in 1972, though it struggled for years to become relevant. But the party eventually gained political ground despite Jean-Marie's convictions for anti-Semitism. His political peak came in 2002, runner-up to Jacques Chirac in that year's presidential election. He handed the reins to his daughter, Marine, in 2011, who worked to rebrand the party and sensationally expelled her father. Marine Le Pen lost to Emmanuel Macron in the 2017 presidential election, but pushed on with party reforms, renaming it National Rally. She lost again to Macron 5 years later, though with a much improved vote share. And in parliamentary elections that followed, National Rally became the biggest party on the right, further normalising its place in politics. Well, let's go back to Adam. And Adam, just a brief take there on the history of this party. And you and I, again, last year in Paris, talked about the way that she had rebranded and normalised this party from the days of her father to Jordan Bardella, who very much was almost like a social media rock star. He'd taken to TikTok and Instagram, various other social media platforms to sell the message of the party. And I was certainly speaking to young people in Paris who found the message was resonating with them.
It's a fascinating history, this, because you do go from Jean-Marie Le Pen, who many people saw as a poisonous, nasty Holocaust denier with multiple convictions, who then oversaw Marine Le Pen, his daughter, becoming leader of the National Front, and she ended up throwing him out and renaming the party, and without any doubt doing her best to detoxify it. And you have to say she has moved that party from the very far right. I mean, it's not in the mainstream by any sense, it's certainly not in the centre, but it's certainly now in that grey area between very right and far right. And she has attracted more support. She has made herself much more palatable to voters who at the time are disenchanted to some extent with some of the centrist policies of Emmanuel Macron. French politics has really fragmented. That's why it's become so unstable in the parliament, between centre, left, sometimes very far left, and right, sometimes far right. And into that, Marine Le Pen has started to look much more, in many people's opinions, not just somebody they can vote for, but somebody who could be president. And as you said, she has moulded Jordan Bardella, this protege of hers, 29-year-old young man, into clearly her successor. Now, the master plan of the RM was always clear. It was supposed to be that Jordan Bardella would end up as Prime Minister in the last parliamentary election, and in the first round that looked possible. In the second round the RM vote fell away, but that's still the hope, is that he will be their leader, the Prime Minister. And then the second part of that was Marine Le Pen finally, after 3 failed runs at it, would end up winning the presidency. And they're not a million miles from that. Jordan Bardella is a high-profile politician, a young man with an enormous following, particularly on social media, particularly among the young voters that the Rassemblement National have long targeted. And on the other side of that coin, Marine Le Pen was the favourite to win the presidency. Not, we should say, by a mile. It was a close-run thing between her and Edouard Philippe, the former Prime Minister. But when you looked at the polls, she was slightly ahead of him. And now that has all come crashing down. But we put in that little caveat, A, that there is a path. She could win an appeal. She could end up getting a run to the presidency. And the second thing is, we are in the role of unintended consequences and erratic political environments here. We simply don't know
what will be the repercussions in France and around the world of this decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam, thank you so much for all of your analysis there. So as arch-conservatives and the far-right united in fury over Marine Le Pen's conviction, Elon Musk has so far been the most well-known Trump administration figure to react. His boss, President Trump, enjoyed much more laid-back European engagement over the weekend, playing golf with the Finnish president. And it appears the golf diplomacy has paid off, at least for Europe's hopes of pressuring Russia over a ceasefire in Ukraine. President Alexander Stubb sat down with our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn.
Fresh from a game of golf with Donald Trump, Finland's president in Downing Street, with news of a swing in the US president's mood over Vladimir Putin. It was during a round together over the weekend, he says, that President Trump shared his feelings about the Russian leader and his attitude to peace in Ukraine.
Impatient, that's for sure. And, we were talking a lot about the ceasefire and the frustrations he had that Russia was not committing to it. If there was a pendulum of trust and distrust, certainly Russian activity in the past few weeks has proven that we're moving more towards the distrust side of things.
Alexander Stubb has Donald Trump's ear, but he's a hawk on Russia and had this advice, he said, in between the teeing off and putting.
I would be very distrustful, and my message to President Trump when he asked, can I trust Putin, was, no, you can't.
What did he say in return?
Well, we'll leave those things out on the golf course.
Sure, but do you think, are you getting the impression from him he's re-evaluating at least the Russian leader?
I'm getting the impression that he's analysing the situation.
Allies like Keir Starmer, who President Stubb is here to visit, will welcome a firmer line from Donald Trump on Russia. But will it make a difference? The US president was sounding irritated last night about Putin.
Some of the things that were said over the last day or two having to do with Zelensky, because when he considers Zelensky not credible, he's supposed to be making a deal with him, whether you like him or you don't like him. So I wasn't happy with that.
President Stubb hopes Donald Trump will now act and put pressure on Vladimir Putin.
I think we need a colossal amount of sanctions on the 20th of April if the Russians don't abide by the ceasefire.
And are you confident that President Trump is going to apply that colossal pressure?
I am fairly confident that he will do that.
Hopeful or confident? Is it going to happen?
More confident than hopeful.
Is there anything left that can be thrown at Putin that will make him change?
Well, there are many things that are left. I mean, the Americans are talking about oil prices, serious caps on oil. The Russian economy is hurting, and that's why we need to continue the pressure. And we can make the sanctions conditional, at least in the sense that if there's no ceasefire, we increase the pressure.
While Presidents Trump and Stubb were playing golf over the weekend, Vladimir Putin was sending yet more drones to attack Ukraine. He's met diplomacy with delaying tactics. It'll take a lot more than reports of Donald Trump having a change of heart to force him to agree to a ceasefire. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News.
Well, let's look ahead now to Wednesday, which President Trump is calling Liberation Day. The US is set to begin reciprocal tariffs, which will be tailored to match what the president sees is the burden that each country places on America. For example, value-added taxes. Donald Trump insists the reciprocal tariffs will include all nations and not be limited to those like Canada, China and Mexico that have the biggest trade imbalances with America. And don't forget, he's already slapped tariffs on aluminium, steel and vehicles, along with higher levies on all goods from China. Donald Trump sees tariffs as a way to get consumers to buy American and protect the US economy from unfair global competition. However, economists warned it'll be American consumers who end up paying higher prices, and markets are unsettled at the prospect of a recession. Well, let's bring in our US correspondent, Mark Stone, for us. And Mark, I mean, the one message we've received from the beginning of this second term for Donald Trump is that tariffs are necessary. And we know that he is looking at going big on Wednesday. The question is, how big?
Yeah. The other message that we have received from economists pretty much across the board, economists that I think Donald Trump would describe as part of the establishment and therefore not thinking outside the box, is that tariffs are universally bad in that they make things more expensive for everyone, whether you are at the beginning of the supply chain in the country from where the goods are coming from, or whether you are at the end of the supply chain where they are going. Costs go up for everyone. But, when you drill down a bit, it is a bit more nuanced than that. There are some sectors and some parts of the economy, some CEOs who do believe that actually in the medium to long term, tariffs, they're blunt, they have a harsh impact in some areas, but they are necessary to rebalance a global economy that has been dealt some huge difficulty by the likes of China, who don't abide by World Trade Organization rules, that manage to inject a whole load of money into their own industry to make their product cheaper so that they can then import it much, much cheaper. And in America, over decades, we, of course, have seen that decimating the American industry in so many sectors. So Donald Trump's idea is to sort of start afresh, reset the playing field, and longer term, he believes, it could take a decade or so, it will rebuild the American economy. And I went to West Virginia. I went to two places, in fact, to West Virginia and then to a brewery just down the road from where I am now, to assess what different people, different sectors, CEOs, but also the general public, what they make of Trump's tariff plans.
Donald Trump's blueprint for America looks something like this. Big industry, power and might. Made in America, made by Americans.
How many people work here? It's 1,100 and some.
We're inside a metal plant in rural West Virginia. It is one of the largest facilities of its kind in the world. Aluminium. Aluminum, they call it here.
There's a lot of power, there's a lot of force coming down on that slab.
Heated, molded.
It's like pastry. They're just like... It's exactly same principle.
Transformed from massive blocks into coils and sheets. It rolls through here to customers far and wide.
So space, aerospace, transportation, general engineering products, military products. Well, you do get a real sense here of the president's vision. American manufacturing, American jobs, and American product. But expanding all this, that is a true challenge.
Because the competition here is cheaper aluminium from overseas, from China mostly. It is a familiar story, and it's what's behind Donald Trump's core tariff plans.
We believe in free and fair trade. And the point is that trade has been free but not fair in aluminum.
The boss of the multinational firm that runs this plant says tariffs are blunt but necessary.
There's been massive growth in the capacity installed in China, but a lot of that has been allowed by illegal subsidies. So what it means is that overall trade of aluminum products is broken as an international system. It is clear that not all countries, not all products are unfairly traded. But there is a history of Chinese production making its way through third countries into the US. So a blunt, approach was required.
Blunt for sure. Blanket tariffs are causing huge angst, precisely because resets create uncertainty. Short-term, pain. Gain only maybe down the line.
And what about, people at the other end of the supply chain that you're at the sort of top end of, the small businesses? That's going to hit them hard. How can you, at the other end of this process, reassure them?
I'm not going to say that an increase in cost is a good thing for a customer. But I think it's important to look at things and put them in proportion.
Proportion is not a luxury all can afford. In the northeast of Washington, D.C., just 4 miles from the frenetic policy decisions at the White House, the Right Proper Brewery is a dream realized for Thor Cheston, a small business owner with a thriving company.
These are our grain silos.
And the grain is from where?
Canada.
Thor relies on the international supply chain. The cans, aluminium from Canada too.
The malt is from Germany and Britain.
So we are always looking for the best quality ingredients, no matter where it comes from.
It is a complex global web of manufacturing to make American beer, and margins are tight. A small increase in the aluminum price would have a massive impact for you.
We don't have the luxury of just raising our prices. You know, we're in a competitive landscape.
You could face some real increase in costs if they start tariffing from Germany, from UK, Canada. It could have a really, existential impact on you.
Yes, absolutely. And so, we've dealt with major problems like this before. We've had to pivot a lot. We have survived the global pandemic. Yeah. We've done it before. We just need a break.
I guess the government's argument is buy American, but it's not as simple as that.
It's not as simple as that, no.
Back in West Virginia, right next to the aluminium plant, a reminder of what once was and what Trump says could be again.
Here's the thing, though. All that aluminium being squashed and squeezed in that plant down there is sourced from abroad these days. And so the ultimate ambition is to reopen smelters like this, to make the aluminium here in America, make the whole process American. But that requires massive investment and a constant supply of reliable energy to keep the smelters going 24 hours a day.
From the factory, the Ohio River still carries what's left of America's heavy industry.
Living in West Virginia, we're big on coal.
Through towns like Parkersburg, not the thriving place it used to be.
We used to have a really nice aluminum plant right down the river here, and it shut down.
Here, you can see why so many rolled the dice for Donald Trump.
Obama, he shut down mines and ruined a lot of people's lives.
I think it'll bring jobs back. Definitely bring jobs back to the U.S. He's putting the tariffs on the other countries, bringing their things in, and then that way, it equals out.
I know that it's probably going to end up jacking up prices here in the U.S. I am a registered Republican, but I don't support the man in any way, shape, or form.
I'm for Republican, but I'm not exactly aligned with Donald Trump.
The Trump tariff blueprint is full of jeopardy. If it fails, it will be here, places like this, again, that will be hit hardest.
No politician with millions or billions of dollars cares about me or you. Nobody.
Mark Stone, Sky News, in West Virginia.
And Mark, we've seen how the markets have reacted over the course of the last few weeks. Every time Donald Trump does say tariffs, it does feel a little bit like he's just too relaxed when it comes to the big R word, recession. Some commentators are saying he's playing recession roulette here.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to be concerned. He talks about the markets a lot when they're going up, and when they're going down, he says that they are irrelevant, and that he is concerned not with Wall Street, but with Main Street. And it's certainly true that there is a difference between what goes on and what on Wall Street and what's actually happening on Main Street. That said, it is maybe a slight tangential issue, Yalda, but it is the case that in America, people are much, much more tuned in and attached to the stock market than perhaps they are in the UK and in Europe. Pensions are much, much more tightly fixed to the whims of the stock market. And so for everyday people, it's not just the wealthy that look at the stocks and shares and play on stocks and shares. If the stock market goes down in America, that does hit people hard indeed. So perhaps Donald Trump should be taking more notice. Perhaps he is taking more notice than he lets on. But a Wednesday is going to be a huge day. Liberation Day is what he is calling it. We've heard so much over the past, 70-odd days since he became president about tariffs. Some of these tariffs are designed to be punishment, effectively getting countries like Canada, Mexico and China to do something that they're not already doing. That is, in those cases, to stop the flow of fentanyl, the street drug. But much more broadly, the tariffs he's talking about on Wednesday perhaps blanket tariffs across the for all goods coming into America. He's not been clear on quite what he will do yet. They are specifically designed to reinvigorate the American economy, but so many economists say that they simply won't do that. They will put prices everywhere up, and it will be very difficult indeed. From a British perspective, Yalda, we know that Keir Starmer spoke yesterday, late yesterday, to Donald Trump. There has been a real hope in Downing Street that they would manage somehow, because they're not attached to Europe in the form of the EU. There isn't a massive deficit between the UK and the US, that they would manage to be able to find some sort of a carve-out. They've not done that yet. I think we should see Liberation Day as the beginning of a negotiation, or many negotiations with so many different countries, as they accept what Donald Trump is about to throw at them, and then try to find ways to get out of it, or to perhaps reframe their whole economies, which will of course take many years, to forget about America and to look elsewhere. But this is going to be painful indeed for many people.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, thank you so much. You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come on the programme, stories of survival offer pockets of hope in the devastation of Myanmar's earthquake.
It's like a football final with only one team on the pitch. This isn't just a call to vote, but a call to remember. The freedom fought for by the African National Congress.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A cyclone and 2 burst dams wiped out hundreds of generational homes.
This was the second dam that the floodwaters hit before it tore into Derna. We are in the heart of Nairobi, and we're watching as protesters were heavily tear-gassed.
The sheer fearlessness and persistence of these guys is astonishing.
We help you understand the world with us. I remember going into the iconic Omdurman market in the heart of Sudan's capital for the first time since the war started. And this is what's left of it. Bullet holes through buildings, shelled balconies, bullet cases on the floor. I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories and the lives of millions of people. This is insane. This was a bustling residential area. So many friends who lived here. My most memorable interview was with a 15-year-old boy who'd survived being stranded on a migrant boat on its way from Senegal to the Canary Islands.
After 13 days, our food, water and fuel supply ran out.
I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. The number of people confirmed dead in Myanmar after Saturday's earthquake has passed 2,000. That's according to the country's military rulers, who've asked the world for help. But aid agencies are up against ongoing war, ruined roads and patchy communications. Still, there are moments of hope, including a family who filmed what they thought were their final moments in the rubble. Our Asia correspondent Cordelia Lynch reports.
This is Sky Villa condominium in Mandalay. Several buildings totally flattened. It is an apocalyptic scene. And yet, from this massive destruction, survivors emerge. Here, a pregnant woman pulled out on a cable. Inside, a man is also trying all he can to hang on to life, wedged in a tiny crack. But local people have told Sky News as many as 300 people may have died here. Among those missing, Ko Lin's sister. Like so many, he's distraught and desperate. These images may give him hope, though. 2 teenagers huddled with their grandmother, bloodied but alive, filming themselves for their families in case they didn't make it. Their father assumed they hadn't. He even asked others to help find their bodies. But miraculously, they pulled through. It's feared many thousands have not survived this disaster in Myanmar, though. Here, 270 monks were taking a religious exam when the earthquake hit. 100 are still missing. 60 mosques have also been damaged and destroyed. Places of worship obliterated. Min U tells us more than 300 people were inside praying, many of them teenagers. Rescue teams have been very slow to reach the worst-hit areas. The ruling junta tightly controlling their movements, leaving survivors to do a lot of the harrowing, heavy lifting. And even in this desperate hour for a country at war, when the military needs to drop aid, elsewhere in Myanmar, it is still dropping bombs. A nation on the edge, plunged into further trauma. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, less than 100 days into Trump 2.0, how well are governments responding? I'll get the perspective of the Asia region emerging as an even bigger US rival.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. In the 2.5 months since President Trump returned to the White House, the world has been grappling with an upending of everything from alliances and economics. So how well are governments responding? Well, with me is Dr. John Lee, Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute and former Senior National Security Advisor to the Australian Government. Thank you so much, John, for joining us here on the programme. I mean, as I said in the intro there, we're about 70 days in and every week has felt like a new set of rules, policies, shifting and changing alliances, certainly with the West and Europe in particular. I mean, today I was looking at a piece in the New York Times that sort of said European leaders are worried that America, this administration, sees Europe as the enemy. I mean, from your perspective, how should all of these different leaders who are paying homage to Donald Trump, but also having conversations behind closed doors, make sense of everything that we're seeing?
I think Asian allies, including Australia, are treating the Trump administration a lot better than European allies. There are a few simple rules. The first thing is you don't treat the American president like an idiot. You don't dismiss it as all whimsical or idiosyncratic. Look, I don't agree with everything the Trump administration is doing, but there is a logic behind it, and he does begin from a place of reason. So, for example, you look at the security alliances. Trump does point to a very valid structural problem, and that is that American allies simply around the world have not carried their weight. Now, how he goes about fixing that, obviously, that's not necessarily constructive, but European allies, for a start, need to recognise that. And on economics, once again, we can't treat Trump as an economic simpleton. He is worried about the deindustrialisation of the United States. Once again, tariffs may not be the answer, but for him, tariffs is a way of forcing the rest of the world, whether it's China or whether it's an ally, to start making things again in America. Once we sort of accept that premise, then we can have a proper conversation with the Trump administration about the best way of going about that.
So what lessons then, other than, as you say, take what he says seriously, what lessons can European leaders learn from what the Asian nations are doing, allies in Japan, for example, even Australia?
Well, the allies in Japan, the allies in Asia, particularly Japan, but Australia as well, I think we're trying to understand why Trump is doing what he's doing. He's not simply doing it because he's a nasty or spiteful and unusual president. He's doing it because he has a very particular set of concerns about the direction of the United States and how the United States is being, in his view, being exploited by the rest of the world. We may disagree with that, but if we can at least engage on that basis, which I think the Japanese, South Koreans and Australians do that, I think we have a better chance of getting a favourable outcome.
I mean, this administration has made it clear that it wants to detangle itself from the Ukraine war and focus more on rivalry with China, because that is the formidable enemy that they want to focus on all fronts, whether it's cyber warfare, their investment in AI, the sort of concerns about, taking over Taiwan, for example. Are middle countries, the likes of Australia, Japan even, going to end up crushed in all of this or, be used as some kind of bargaining chip with any kind of negotiation with China?
I would distinguish between what's happening in Europe and what's happening in East Asia. If you look at Europe, and I speak to quite a lot of people in the White House close to the president, the way they view Europe is in this way. The problem is Russia. Now, the European nations have the economic heft to deal with Russia, but they haven't simply looked after their own defence. And that is a neglect that they have chosen to commit. That's how the Trump administration views it. Now, if you turn to Asia, I'm more optimistic coming from that region, because the way the Trump administration talk about it privately is that even if Asian allies did everything the Trump administration wanted, that still does not provide a check against the Chinese because they're simply too large and too strong. It requires the United States. So in a sense, structurally, Asia needs the United States, whereas for the Trump administration, Europe has made its bed. It has decided not to look after its own security interests, and therefore America is less interested in what's happening in Europe.
When you look at Signalgate, and I'm talking about the chat group that was exposed with, the cabinet members part of that chat, and some references to Europe, I think that's what left many Europeans quite shocked, that they were being called pathetic, for example, behind closed doors. And this wasn't just a speech by J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Conference, but there was a genuine feeling that they were constantly bailing Europe out. Are these the kind of conversations that are just being openly had?
Yes, look, even though I myself wouldn't suggest speaking about allies like that, Trump does point to a terrifying, or at least a worrying reality. That is, for decades now, Europe has been told that it needs to step up to look after its own security interests. It's not just Trump. Barack Obama did that. Joe Biden did that. Even George W. Bush did that. But Europe simply has not. And remember that Russia first invaded Ukraine more than 10 years ago. Europe was given a warning sign then and hasn't done anything about it. So the point I'm trying to make is that even though I don't always agree with what the Trump administration is doing, it actually correctly identifies a structural issue with the Europeans. That is, they simply do not take their own security seriously. And so those comments are regrettable that they got out, and I think they're overly dismissive, but it does point to, I'm afraid, a worrying reality about the European approach to their own security.
John, always fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, the two astronauts who were stuck in space open up about what it was like and what went wrong.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power.
No freedom! Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast. It's starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Sky News get the full story first. Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Now, in the past hour or so, we heard from NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams after their return to Earth. The pair splashed down 2 weeks ago off the coast of Florida after their 8-day mission was extended to 9 months following issues with their capsule. Suni and Butch made the most of their time on board the ISS, with NASA saying they performed over 150 experiments and logged about 900 hours of research. Let's get more from our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, who joins us. And I mean, Tom, this is such an extraordinary story.
Remarkable press conference in a way. I think being an astronaut's very much about preparation. I think it was clear from this that they were prepared to deal with the difficult political questions that have faced NASA and its contractors and others because of the noise made largely by Donald Trump on the campaign trail and then subsequently about the fact that they were stuck there because of political interference and that they were effectively stuck up there, yes, because it was a political decision, despite providing no evidence of that. And when I put it to them specifically, did politics make this situation harder? Again, we got a slightly evasive response and one that they left to their mission commander to answer all of them.
The entire time up there, I launched with that singular objective of showing up to the station and having to integrate Butch and Sonny into a crew with Alex and myself. And then we were planning, from day one to return toward the end of February. That all predicated on the fact that we would have a replacement crew show up and we'd have adequate handover with that crew before we left. That's important to maintain the mission of the International Space Station to continue pushing research and exploration. And that was never in question the entire time. There were a lot of options that were discussed, and the ground team and the team on the ground, we've alluded to it a couple times already, is gigantic. And everybody was working with singular focus on how do we end the Crew 9 mission at the right time and maintain the safety and the success of the space station mission.
Yeah, Tom, they're clearly trying to avoid getting sucked into the politics of all this because it has been politicised. That press conference went on for over an hour. Just give us a sense of what other issues were raised.
Well, there were questions about, was this politicised? Were they really ever stuck? Obviously, all the other questions as well about how well they're feeling, because obviously they were quite senior astronauts, spending quite a long time in space. But they avoided those more political ones quite deftly, and I think that's significant and perhaps not surprising. NASA faces the same sort of budgetary threats from Elon Musk and his government efficiency office. Mr. Musk even suggesting very recently that the International Space Station is brought back down to Earth, retired 2 years earlier than is currently planned, coming back as early as 2027, he was saying needs to happen. That is something which is obviously not what NASA wants to see, not what these astronauts want to see, and they're choosing their words very, very carefully so as not to fall foul of their new boss, I would suspect, but also continue, I think, a long tradition of federal employees, and let's not forget that that's what they are working for NASA, of generally being cautious and respectful when it comes to their paymasters and their president. So perhaps that's part of it as well.
Yeah. Really fascinating, extraordinary story, and good to see them back down to earth. And as we said, they splashed down about 2 weeks off the coast of Florida after their what was supposed to be their 8-day mission was extended to 9 months. Well, that's it from me and the team. Good night.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Sky News get the full story first. Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.